Okay, got it. It is not that at every P4 station did it the same thing, but I at P4 Kalmar, I decided to go all in because I was so adamant now. I really know that we need to do this now. And for me, at this moment, there were no questions. There were no going back or no alternatives. Now we are going to skip the debates. Did you hear it? Skip the debates.
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah. So how did it happen then? We decided no debates, only question and answers in sessions in the studio. We had a lot of audience participations regarding the questions. We were out asking the audience what was important for them, because in the autumn before we talked about what kind of question could be big questions during the election, and we had some items, but as you know, in last spring, the questions were not the one you had thought about in the autumn before, because a lot of things have changed in the world. But anyhow, we decided to skip the debates, and we had fewer topics. And I think that was very important, that we decided not to talk about everything, because you can't talk about everything when you have 4 minutes. So we decided to use fewer topics, and also letting the hosts be more prepared, because they had more time to prepare. And then the hosts also felt more, how you say, they felt more good at the subject. They felt more secure also, and more initiated. And the thing I did was also prepping the politicians. And by that, I mean, I talked to them before, and I said to them, now we are not going to have debates, but you are coming to the studio. We choose 2 politicians for each session. And I told them, you have 4 minutes. You can use these 4 minutes to talk about what you haven't done and what the other one haven't done. And you can talk a lot of shit about the other one. Or you can use these 4 minutes talking about what you want and how the society will react on you, or will work under your politics. And they understood, because I said the audience doesn't want to have people arguing. They don't listen to it. And when we talked, the politicians that I had the possibility to talk more and longer with, they say that really for us all, it's not so interesting to listen to. Sometimes they like to gnab with their colleagues and so on, but they understood what I meant when I talked to them and told that the audience doesn't want to have this gnabbing and arguing. And also, when we choose the politicians, we choose representatives to avoid confrontations, because sometimes you think that, oh, I'm going to take this politician and that politician because they are so far apart. And I know that if I put them in a studio together, there will be a big fight. But you know that the politicians on the politicians on the edges, sometimes you know exactly what they want to say, and the audience also know what they want to say. So it's not necessary to put them in a conflict. Then if you do that, you do it only for conflict, not for letting the audience know about what the politicians want with their politics. Sorry for my English. But do you know what I mean when I say that? It's so easy to take the edges, or to take the one that you know are far apart. But even the audience know that they are far apart. It's more interesting to listen to those who are more close to each other, because then I think for the audience, it's also more important to know the differences. So that was an active choice. And of course, we had talked to all the people that, because we are public service and we need to have, everyone needs to get their voice heard and so on. And we had also, we sent an email to all the other politicians saying, okay, you are not going to talk in this particular part, but I want to know your argument in this question, and the host will read it to the audience, because we need to have this balance also. But that was no problem. They formulate some meanings and said, okay, you can take this. If you have any questions, you can just ask me, or you can ask me later if you want to. Well, anyhow, for me, it was not a problem letting go of the debates. It was not that I was sitting at home thinking, oh my God, what have I done? I will be so hated for this. No. So I was so decided, and I think my mindset was so clear. So I think that was also a big thing, that we dared to skip the debates. And then we had Bosse. This is Bosse, my senior colleague. He's retired, but he didn't want to miss the election. And I'm very, very thankful for that, because he has been working with elections for so many years. So I used him as a guide for the audience. He was listening to the politicians, and then he came into the studio. Okay, they are saying this and that, and this will mean so and so. And he made analysis and so on. He was a rock, very good. And he was doing only this, nothing else. He was not doing any reportage or presenting any news and so on. He was doing only this, because I didn't want anyone to think that he was analyzing and then sitting as a news anchor, choosing things, how to say. So he was doing only this. We had this, as I told you before, we choose the politicians very carefully, because we also studied their politics before, so we know which one to choose. And we had 3 steps in the show. First, there was a short presentation of the topic that we had chosen, and also of the politicians, of course. And if something big had happened in the world or in our society, they could answer that also in this short presentation, because we didn't want to seem like we didn't know what had happened if there was a big thing. And then we used one topic, more or less, and they had to talk about that, and also in a solution way. And we asked, the presenter asked questions, and as the presenter only had 1 or maybe 2 topics, the presenter could be very prepared, and could also ask questions if they said something, oh, we want this to happen, and then the presenter could say, okay, how do you do that, and so on. So the presenter could follow up with constructive questions. And I think that if we had, as we have been doing years before, had maybe 4, 5, 6 topics, they would just rush over it like this, and they didn't have time to ask the following up questions. Now they had, and they could also be very initiated, because they had time to study before. And then we had a small part that was yes or no question. And that was mostly because we could get in we could get them to answer some of the other questions. Do you want nuclear power or not? Do you want to raise the taxes? Yes or no? And then it also got more, it got quicker and more dynamic also, because there was you need to think how it is presented to the audience also. And what have we learned from this, and what was the reactions? We think we have bigger audience responses. We experienced that. You can see in the comments, you can see in the mail flow, and it was not aggressive comments. I had no comments about why didn't you have any debates. I was expecting that, but I didn't get any. And those arguments that is difficult to respond when you have a tit-for-tat argumentation. It's not so easy to respond to them because they are accusations mostly, and it's very difficult to respond to them. They disappear. And also the hosts, they were perceived as more knowledgeable. As I told you, it was because they had fewer subjects, they could get more focused. And also, this is very funny, because when they came down, I talked to the politicians before and say, okay, now we're going to do it this way, and so on and so on. But you know that when they come down from the studio, I didn't really know what they were supposed to, or what they felt. But when I talked to them, they were very pleasantly surprised and said, I like this. I could talk more, they said. And they said also that they could get their what they wanted to say got through much better, because it was a discussion more than a debate. And I found out that the debates were missed by no one. I think maybe one of the politicians on one of the edges thought that he would have liked, he is also the youngest politician, he would like to have had a more debate. But when I talked to him, he understood my intentions and also the audience intentions. So I would say that the debates were missed by no one. And now I'm very, very happy that we decided not to have the debates. And it was, I think it was a lift for our election radio. But I will give you some takeaways. And number one, change takes time. If you have an election, it is not that you can start talking about constructive journalism a couple of months before. Maybe you will have one or two questions or so, but if you want to have a mindset, it takes longer time. And you need to have the right mindset. For me, constructive journalism, I can talk for hours about that, but I will not do it now. But for me, constructive journalism is a mindset. It's my everyday life. It is not something I do just when I am a journalist. It is my way of being. And I think that if this is my way of being, I am not that so much apart from the audience in the way of thinking and reacting and so on. And also leadership matters. And by that, I mean the leadership, the closest leadership. If you are a boss at your station, wherever you work, you need to be into this. You need to want to do this. If you are hesitating, your reporters will hesitate. And also for us, it was so important that the leadership at Sveriges Radio, the big leadership, said, this is the way. And also cooperation is key, because it is not that me and Cecilia are sitting at a meeting, talking to each other and saying, this is the way to do it. That it's not working like that. You need to invite other people, talk to other colleagues, try, okay, these are the keys of constructive journalism. How can we take these keys and make it into, and take them into our work? So that is very important. And if you, as a boss or manager, or what you call yourself, if you decide not to do the debates, you need to find out something else to do instead, so that you can feel that you do your public service, or what you have to do, or to give the audience something, and also to find other ways to do it. Because if you just say, we are not going to do debates, and then like this, it won't work. I think you need to figure out, okay, how do we do it instead? And then you have a plan. But the biggest things, if I can choose some of these, my takeaways, it is that change takes time, and also that leadership matters. And I could add one more, and it is, you can do it. It's not dangerous. I've done it. It's not dangerous. You can do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise. That's very, very interesting. You said when we talked before that you were looking forward to talking about this because you feel it's very, very important, and you want to spread the word. Can you just say, why is this important? Why is this so important to you? Could you just give a brief comment on that?
Yeah, this is very important because we are living in a world that democracy is not longer taken for granted in every places. And I think that also when the audience are skipping the news, many people are not, they are skipping the news because they think they are too black and too bored and too dark. And I think we need to think how we as journalists make the content so that they will start listening again or keep listening, because we have important things to tell the audience. And I think constructive journalism is a very good way of doing that. And therefore, I think that it is also important to tell other journalists, even if sometimes you are competitors or what you say. But I think this is so important because this is a way of getting back the audience and also making them listening to news. So if you make them listen to the news or to your content, they can also get more background so that they can make their own decisions in life, not just looking at social media and so on. And so that I think is very important.
Thanks a lot for that answer, which I think sheds very good light on the whole what a lot of us are concerned about, and it will be interesting to hear comments and questions from the rest of you, the audience here.
Could Louise, perhaps you could stop sharing the presentation? Okay, thanks. So we see each other better.
Yeah,
great.
Anybody wants to comment or ask Louise something?
I think,
yes.
Yes.
Please unmute your mic, please.
Thank you for your interesting presentation. Great to hear. But I was wondering, you said it was a way of your way of life, your mindset. So what do you mean with constructive journalism? How does it differ from other ways of life and other ways of doing journalism?
Well, I think I can talk for the journalists as if you think that we are very good in finding problems, and of course that is what we are supposed to do. If things doesn't work, if there is a problem, or if someone is not doing the job, it is for us journalists to find that out, that we can agree about. But sometimes we just give the audience the problem and telling this is not working, this is not good, this person is not doing what he is supposed to do. And we are not offering the audience forward-looking things like, how are you going to solve this then? Okay, now we know this is the problem, but is there a solution somewhere in the world or in your own mind? And I think that is very important, to give the audience the hope that things are, almost everything are in, it's like a wheel moving forward, I think, the constructive journalism. And also when I talk about my life, you know, that if sometimes you can feel a bit down in your life, you can have problems, you can think everything is not working and you are very low, but you don't want to stay low forever, because you have something in yourself. Okay, I feel a bit down now, but how can I make it better for myself? And then I start to think about the solutions in my head. How can I do it? Well, I can call my colleague Cecilia and ask her, or I can call Petter and ask him, or I can call my mother to ask her about. And I think we all have inside us a way of wanting things to be better, because we are seeking the hope also. And that is when I thought that this is the way my mind is working. And I think also the journalistic can work like that, because someone said we have a lot of talks about this inside Swedish Radio, and one of the people listening said, we are so good making cliffhangers as journalists. And I think that is a way of seeing it. You give the audience cliffhangers, and then they hang like this, and okay, they are saying, what am I supposed to do now? And we don't tell them. But as a journalist, you can say, okay, now you are hanging there, that's not good, but maybe you can take this step, or you can take this step, or you can do that. And we can present that, because there are solutions out there, not only problems. But it is also important that we do our scrutiny work, I think.
Great, thanks for that answer. Joy Kibaravara, you have a question.
Yes, so thank you so much, Louise, for a really thought-provoking and inspiring presentation, and good to see you again in this forum. So my question has to do with two concepts that are very important to constructive journalism, the idea of co-creating content with the news audiences, as well as news engagement. And I was just wondering, within the context of the elections, to what extent did you engage the news audiences in, for example, coming up with the topics or the questions that you had for the politicians? Thanks.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And we did in springtime before, I think we started in, maybe it was late February or the beginning of March. We went on tour in every municipality in my region. There are 12 of them, but we went to them and we set up, we took a van and we went there, and we had a reporter and some social media reporter, and we just talked to people, asking them what is going on in your life and in your municipality and in your mind. And then we found out what people were thinking about for real, not just what the politicians thought that they wanted to talk about. So when we came back in, I think it took until the beginning of May, we had a lot of questions and we had a lot of names from people talking to us, and it was not that we used them to do reportage during the springtime, but then we could call them. For instance, in Mönsterås, we met a young person. He was 18, he was going to be, but this was his first election anyhow, and he said, I have no idea of where to put my votes. And he told us that he had asked all the political parties to send him their material because he really wanted to make up his mind of what was best for him. So we followed him. We met up with him in August, and we talked to him. Okay, how are you doing, and how have you decided, and so on. And we went with him for the election day. One of my reporters followed him to vote. So I don't think we would have found him if we hadn't been out talking to people. So the best thing you can do if you want to have a connection with the audience is to be there, out there, talk to them outside, not by phone or so. You need to be there. And I would say that they had a big part in what kind of items we choose, but of course we had also something to say about the subjects. So but they had a big part, not the whole part, but the big part.
Great. Are you content with that answer, Joy?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks a lot. So now we have Mikko, and after that, Laura.
All right, thanks. And thank you, Louise. I just want to you said words of encouragement that you can do it, and just go ahead. And I want to repeat that message too. I see that there are people from the Finnish media present here in discussion, and I really, we have an election spring coming up, election next April. And just yesterday, I was participated in a discussion in a place that calls themselves Dialogue Academy. And I'm glad to see that Helena is here also from that discussion. And we talked about the role of journalism in the society and how people perceive politics, and are the politicians, is it just like a cynical game, or are there really issues that can be tackled? And I think that this kind of new formats are really longed after. We just talked yesterday about we should try new things, new ways of reporting elections and doing the election debates in a different format. And you have just offered us one example of that. And I think that the example in itself is a very valuable thing, and the encouragement to journalists that just go ahead and try something different. Thanks.
And you know what also is a big plus of this is that because when we are journalists and you have a politicians, it's like we are we take a rope apart. Do you know what I mean? I am supposed to be a journalist that ask aggressive questions. No, I'm a bit, but you know, I am a journalist and you are a politician. But if I, as a journalist, start to ask different kind of questions, I will have different answers. And that is, I think, very good for it. It's like, how do you say, challenge the roles. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
You change the roles. You make it a different role, and then you will have different answers. And so they don't answer like if I ask them the same questions year after year after year, they will answer in the same way year after year after year. But if I try to ask the question in another way, I can still ask the question, but I can remake it. I will have another answer, I think.
Great. Laura has a question, and after that, Rita from Yle.
I would have like 20 questions, but I can try to limit myself. But the first one would be just a clarification about the format. In a way, I also agree with Mikko that if you can present that there is a format, then it's easier to adopt, and you can sort of trust that format. Someone has been testing it, and now we have received it. So did it include, was it always like a dialogue, a question and answer? Did you have two politicians?
Yes.
Always in the, so it was one in pairs. Yeah. What would be your argument for doing that instead of having more or having just one?
Just one, I think you will have, maybe you will have in a way that they have too much time and so on, and that you are not, as a public service company, you need to give them the same amount of time and so on. And you don't have that dynamic. And if you have three or more, you can have three, of course, but I think it is more difficult to have them to talk more initiated about the question. And I think so we took a long time to choose the politicians because we wanted to make the best of just this question, the question that we wanted to talk about. And then it was very important to have the other parties' answers so that we could present them to the audience also, but not with sound, with so. And I think too, it was more like a talk than a debate. It was more, it was very much a talk. And they, of course, they could say that, well, okay, now, but you have done, you can say that. So there was a discussion with, of course, with the politicians in the studio, but they were not confrontative. Yeah. And I think you will, if someone is saying, but we want to have a confrontation, we want to have a bit of excitement and so on, you will have it, but not so much, and not so much that it will disturb the audience. The tension is there, but it's not like you are focusing on the tension, you are focusing on the content.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Great. So Rita, what are your thoughts?
Yes, hi. Thank you for the presentation, Louise. Yeah, I'm from Yle. I work in our internal training organization or unit, Academy of Journalism, and we have organized quite a lot of training about constructive journalism, and we have had excellent trainers, but it's very difficult to get especially the news reporters to attend the trainings. Somehow they just don't get the idea of constructive journalism, and no matter what term you use of it or try to work your way around it, not using the word constructive journalism, it's still it seems to be difficult. So and I'm sorry if you answered this already in the presentation. I had a phone call in the middle of it, so sorry if I ask it again, but how did you get your people, your journalists, to get involved and to accept the idea?
I think, as I said, changes takes time. So you need to not think that you can do this in a week or two or in a month or two. And I think also you need to talk about, I mean, journalists want facts. So when we talk about, we can show the statistics that people are leaving the radio. And we have also, we have talked a lot about people, doctors and so on, who are working with the brain and how we react on things and so on. And we can present that this is how, if we have too much negativity, we will turn off because we can't handle it. We talk about, when Cecilia and I do our presentations, we talk about the lions coming. And, you know, one part of the brain, the amygdala is good for that because they react on when something is dangerous, and so that is, it's good. But it was better in the earlier days when there was one lion every second week. Now we have lions coming every day, and then our brains are not made for that, so we can't take it, and then we turn off or we get too much negativity. And you can use facts also to journalists to present, and then you can ask them, how do you react yourself? And how do you think yourself? If you ask them to to think about how they react themselves, maybe you can get a way into them. But I know it's not easy. And also showing them good examples of constructive journalism and say, how do you react on this piece of news instead of this piece of news? Is there a different in your, because you can say you in this, if you have a good piece of constructive journalism, they will have the problem and solution in the same part, if it's good, I think. And you can say, is there different in your own reaction?
Good, thank you.
Great, very good that we could have some words about that, how to change a newsroom culture. We have 4 more questions, so we'll have to move forward quite quickly. Torbjörn, you have a question, and after that Lotte, and then Pia and Nora also wants to ask things. So we just quite quickly, Torbjörn.
Yeah, I think if I got you right, there was a choice for all the local stations in Sweden radio to choose between these alternatives, more or less constructive journalism. Were you the one that went most the full way, or were there others that did the same? And second part of the question, what would you say is the overall state for in Swedish radio for constructive journalism?
Your first question, I think for me, it was a bit easier to implement constructive journalism in this election, because we have been talking about it since 2016, 2017. I know that there were a lot of other local radio stations in Swedish radio that made a part of this. Some of them had one debate and some had none. So it was quite, it was, they took a constructive turn, some more, some less, but they do. Anyhow, and in the Sveriges Radio and the Swedish radio, we have now, it is, the leadership is saying that this is how we are supposed to work with constructive journalism. And I think that in 2017, I was out talking to a lot of radio stations in Swedish radio. And we had, as I told you, we had to talk a lot about the word constructive journalism and so on. But now, as Cecilia and I, we work full time, and now we are talking to a lot of radio local stations and also other departments. They want us to come. So now there is a big difference, because now there is a hunger for constructive journalism now, and I think it is that you need to think about it for a while, and now we have also the time to do it more. I was working as a head of news full time, and you know, working as a head of news is not something you do between 8 and 5. You do it 24 hours a day, and then I had to put in also some constructive journalism in that. But now I can work with it full time.
Very interesting. Lotte, what is your take or question?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Lotte Roskilde. I'm from Denmark. It's very interesting. I would like to, you said that the journalists now have more time to prepare. How much more time do they have now? And what have, very concrete, what have changed in the way your morning meetings are now?
Did you say the morning meetings?
Yeah, when you start in the morning, you prepare changed, and how much more time do they have now? Very concrete, what have changed in the approach now?
The change now, I think, or it was before I left anyhow, but I think it is still, is that we start in a constructive approach. We don't start with, I mean, the mindset is that, okay, how are we going to do this constructive? It's not that we talk about the item or the things that we are going to do, and then when we have 5 minutes left, we say, okay, we need to do this constructive. How do we do it? We start with it. So it's also a mindset for all the people working there. And the time they have or had in this election when they do these interviews with the politicians is that they had more time because they could choose. We choose one, maybe two, but mostly one subject, and then instead of because sometimes we have municipalities with I think 10 or 12 different parties, and to prepare yourself for that it's almost impossible. So if you say instead we are going, you need to talk with two people, then they have more time to talk, and you don't, even if it is very big, it is a very big issue, and it is a very big part of the our election radio, but it was a bit how do you say, it was not so dramatized as it can be. If you say you are going to interview 10 politicians, then you can be, as a host, you can be, how am I going to do that? But if you say you are going to interview 2, and then as a producer, I will help you with the other facts. So yes, they had a lot of more time, I think.
Thanks a lot. We have 2 more minutes and 2 more questions. Maybe we can take Pia's question and Nora's question, and Louise gets to answer both of them as a wrap up. So Pia, what is your question?
Thank you a lot. Very recognizable questions you raised. And as I'm here for very selfish reason, and the election is coming in the spring, I was also very interested in Bosse's role.
Yeah.
How was he casted in a way, and was he with you live and so on? But maybe all this was in your presentation. Will you be sharing it with us, or do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes.
We can pause that and just hear what Nora wants to ask as well.
Yeah, hello, Louise and everybody. I'm also very interested in this. I also work at the Finnish broadcasting company, and Louise asked a very similar thing, but I was just interested that what are the ways that you measure how much audiences this brings? Because I feel that whenever journalists need to use more time for doing journalism, then it's needed to show that what numbers.
Great. So we have the role of Bosse.
The role of Bosse, yes.
And numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, Bosse is, he was actually supposed to be retired, but he didn't want to miss this election. And I didn't want him to go away either, because he has a big knowledge. He has been working with the elections for many, many times. So he has so much knowledge in this. And I wanted to use him in another way, so that he could say he was searching the politics sphere of our region, and then you can say, oh, this is very interesting, we need to talk about this. And then we had a talk, he and I, and then he said, okay, you can go to, and then he went into the shows. It could be in the morning show, in the afternoon show, talking about this item that he thought was interested, and we had of course discussed before. So he made an analysis saying that this is what I think they mean about this, and so on. So he was a helper for the audience. I think he was guiding the audience in things that were interesting, and by doing that we could also capture things that were not so, that we might have missed otherwise, because we are not so many people working at the local radio station, and things are happening all the time. And he was like a helicopter, thinking, okay, this is very interesting, and then he could make some analysis of items.
It must have been of very big strategic importance that he was with it in the mindset, that he didn't sort of steer journalism into something else. Was that any difficulty, or was he on board from the very first day in the mindset?
I think he was. I think he was the one I thought were going to say, why are you not letting us do any debates? Because he has been doing debates for so many years. But he was, I never heard that from him. I think he liked this role. And I think also he found out that it was more productive doing this than a debate with 6, 7, 10 different persons. But then we had the question of measuring, and that is, I think, the big issue for us. We want to measure constructive journalism, but we haven't really found out how to do it yet. The thing that we can measure is the reaction from the audience but it's also in our what we think is more. And I can talk to the social media producers saying that they have different answers and they have more answers on our questions. And I can see that all the people that are calling me talking about our work is not negative anymore. But I would like to have a method of measuring constructive journalism, but we are not there yet. And I hope that we can find some way to do it. We are talking about headlines on our site. Maybe we can try to measure, but it is a problem.
I will catch up on that or pick up on that, because just the other week I learned that at the journalistic department at Gothenburg University have just been granted some kind of project means to do a audience research study on the effects of constructive approaches in journalism. So I guess there will be a few years until we have results, but it's very encouraging that they finally do this.
4 years.
And that is Cecilia, my colleague, I think she has a big part in that. So.
And Eva Landahl, it will take 4 years and then we'll get the answer. We can tell you about it.
So we will have to make that our concluding note.